Thanks. All right.
Let's see it right. Let's see it right.
Just press start video. That's it.
You're on the big screen.
Okay. So here, part 2, 2D contour, right? If you take an element, for example, say this could be coffee thread. Okay. So say you have an element and it's of a certain height, size, and then maybe we'll kind of offset it a little bit so that it has a different shape here, right? Just as an example. Right? So this is a complex shape. So I'm zooming to the selected, and maybe I will look at everything over here and I'll just hide it for now. You can always unhide something by pressing or typing in show. So never forget that you can hide and show certain items. So using this pink object, you can, based on the assignment, run the contour command. So that meaning I type in the word contour, enter. It says contour plane base point. Right. So my base point is the furthest corner from the start, and then the end corner. So basically the length of the object. And then it says distance between contours. Previously, I used 4 feet. For this assignment, let's assume 2 feet as an example, because that's what it's using as the reference. So I'm typing in 2. You can also, while you're using the contours, if you want to break it up, you can assign contours by the layer. So if you want the contours that you're making, the little profiles, if you want them to be on a separate layer so that you can turn them on and off easily so it doesn't get distracting, you can do that. Oh, now I have to type in the layer. I'll put that there. What are my layer options? Oh, you have a layer called foam. Great. Oh. Anyway, current layer, that's fine. So pretend I didn't do anything. Just type in 2. 2 is 2 feet. I've now made contours in the 2 feet direction. I can, if I want to also, I would suggest this. See how I pulled this out and made a copy of it? You can do that in your model because, like many things in Rhino, it's really good to make a copy until you get it right and then put that and do the same thing again, just so that, you know, if you ever mess up, you have a copy and you're not actually editing the main model. So this is my output. So my object versus my contours. And let me change this. All right. So now I'm going to make a copy of this too. So now based on the assignment, I can, oh my God. So that is just the contours, right? Shh. Shh. She can't get to her seat. All right, so see here, This is called the railing system. So it sweeps a profile across a path. So if you were using a rectangular path, it would sweep the profile across that rectangle. But since we're using this L-shaped path, we're going to sweep around that L shape. So the first thing to do is draw that profile. So as we see in the 2G assignment, our skeleton is 2 inches by 4 inches, right? So now I go into my model. I use the rectangle tool, 2 inches, 4 inches. So depending on how you set up your model, you can make a mistake like me and draw 2 feet by 4 feet. So make sure that you're drawing 2 inch mark, 4 inch mark. I've now made this little basswood piece right here, right? So let's change that line color to a different layer. I'm now going to flip it in the profile to which I want it to sweep around that object. So I have to go flip it up vertically, which shouldn't be a problem. I then take that profile and move it to my contours. So I've copied them on the right, and I'm placing them on the midpoint of this rail, this curve, right? When I click on it, it's called a closed, a closed curve. Go back to the assignment. It now says, I got the air conditioner. Okay, now I run the sweep 1 command, right? And I select the rail, i.e. the curve. And then I select the cross-section curves. Oh, that's outside? Thank you. Right? So it says to press, right? Sweep 1 command, select the rail, select the section curve, and press enter and click yes. You ready? Sweep 1, enter. It says select the rail. Our rail is that closed curve. I selected it. This is a terrible, for future reference, a color to use when using Rhino. And now I select the sweep shape. Enter. Enter. Wait, select the sweep. There we go. So when you select it, you got to press enter a few times. It says drag seam point to adjust. Press enter when done. You press enter. So you can actually flip the seam point. So see how that's going inward? The option could be outward. Press enter. This option comes up for the sweep rail option commands. You could just press OK. But see how that turned into the shape around there? For example, I can do it again on this one. So sweep 1. Select the rail. Select the shape. Press enter. This one's going on the inside. I'm not flipping it. Press enter. You press OK. So did you notice that when, for example, if I took the contour and I put it in an opposite direction, so that was on the interior, if I put it on the exterior and ran the same command, sweep 1, you click the rail, you don't have to press enter. Wait. Unknown command. Sweep 1, you click the rail, you don't have to press enter, you click the profile, then you press enter, then you press enter again. And now see how I switch into the ghosted mode. Where is my ghosted mode? You can see how this is the rail versus this is the rail. And because I drew the profile curve here on this corner, it's on the outside of that curve versus here, when I drew the profile on the inside of the curve, it is now on the inside of the rail. So you're literally taking the point and it's moving around that shape. So if you wanted to do it multiple times, I believe. You might be able to do it multiple times at once. Let's see if I select all of this and I do sweep 1 and then select the profile and press enter. Enter again. Nope. Select the rail. You know if you could do this multiple times, or is it just one? Like, do I have to make this sweep rail on every single one, or is there a faster way to do this for multiple profiles? What? Yeah. But like if my shape changed, for example. I think you just have to do them individually. I'm so sorry.
There's the way I just forgot. Yeah.
What? You could array it if it's the same piece over and over again. So for example, if I wanted to array, if I knew that this shape didn't change, I could array, say if I wanted 4 of them. You could array them, but the array tool might not give you, it can give you the dimension if you adjust it. Say if I wanted 5 of them. It could kind of work if you wanted to. It looks like these are just done individually. So your output, plan sections, interior perspectives. We've been over plan cuts. So now when you look at your model, you have your clipping plane. Depending on how. Yeah. Does this make sense? So it's going to show up pretty small. Just make sure that when you're editing it in Illustrator, just make sure that you're giving it enough line weight and thickness to read. You want it to kind of pop off the page, but you also don't want it to, there's sometimes when you're looking at some drawings that depending on the line weight, the line weight that you're using, hold on. Does anybody have any questions while I'm doing this?
So this is just for the plans and sections.
This is for the plan and sections. The idea is that you're using and implementing these tools into your design for 2G as your skin and skeleton. So for example, if you were taking this object in your model, turn off my clipping plane. Say you have this object in your model, right? the idea is that if you put on these new contours, you would potentially either have it exposed on the inside or the outside. But the idea of a skin is that you would have this, like it says in the example for 2G, you have this 1-inch skin. So you take your space, extrude the surface 1 inch. And maybe it has a guys get to look at the ridiculous faces I make at my screen now. Uh-oh. So now you could be inside the space, could be made out of multiple elements. The skin, depending on how you're interacting with it, can be exposed on different edges. So maybe the skin doesn't run the full length of the contour, right? So I'm taking this and I'm dragging it over. So you can look inside your piece. You can remember there's also the walkabout command. It'll help you move around your model a little bit better. So you can type in walk about. It lets you look around your model a little bit easier, kind of moving in and out. You want to maintain, there's a foreground, middle ground, background to any 3D perspective. So maybe there's another piece here that's off to the side.
I think it's so funny.
Right. And then you can go to your render settings, which is under render properties. Current viewport. Turn on your sun if you did it properly. Draft quality 72. We're going to use our current viewport. Maybe you want to change the aspect ratio. If you want to look at the aspect ratio of what you've selected, make sure nothing is selected when you're looking at your properties. Click this little red box, show safe frame. I'm doing something that's a little bit more rectangular, 4:3. So if you go back to your render properties, so this blue box here, four by 3, 16:9, common movie type aspect ratio. Render. You could wait like a half hour. Hold on. It looks like I forgot to turn something on. And now you have a dynamic view. You have foreground, middle ground, background. You have the sun coming in. You have a frame. You might have exposed skin and skeleton. The skin might be on the outside of the frame. Just to show you one other version. Shh. Shh. You guys want me to record it? I'll stop. Maybe the skin's on the outside, so that'll create different shadows. You know, you are in control of the light, the direction, the time of day. How do you want the shadows to read? Do you want it to be a complete frame? Do you want it to be a portal? You know, this kind of creates really, you know, dynamic space. And then when this is done rendering, it's 30 out of 50, it's almost done. So you can see here that's 1280 by 720 pixels. It's a pretty standard dimension. It's not too large. Sometimes your screens in your modern computers or laptops are going to have a really high pixel aspect ratio. So if you just use your viewport, if you use, you know, the default settings of current viewport, it'll give you a higher pixel dimension and it's going to take longer to render. So it might be better viewing on your screen, but viewing on someone else's screen that isn't like a 4K display doesn't matter. It can be a lot smaller, right? You don't want to be sitting there for 20 minutes for each render. So now that it's done rendering, it tells me that because I can see that I can't stop it, and it allows me to save with this Save As button on the top left. I find where I'm saving it. Perspective 1. And now I have that image. That image is a flat image. You can't edit the lines. It is a rasterized image, right? Does anybody want to tell me? Does anybody want to tell me the difference just to end this right now? Does anybody want to tell me the difference for in the VIS assignment, the difference between a 1 and a 2 point perspective? Anybody study Leonardo da Vinci?
No, there's like just one vanishing point.
You are so correct. I wish everyone was paying attention. Yeah.
They matter, so the people in the back is getting more confidence.
I agree. More confidence is key.
A 1 point perspective has one vanishing point, so like all the lines go to that point, and that 2 point has 2 vanishing points.
Yeah. Like my child will soon be able to draw this beautiful photo. This is typically a 1 point perspective. You look off into the horizon, everything is going in one direction.
And life is great.
Life is, you know, yeah, life is great. So in contrast, if you're looking down a hallway, in contrast, a 2 point perspective, there's 2 vanishing points. So when you're looking out into the horizon, things are going down towards it. So if you're looking at a corner of an architectural drawing, it's usually stretched in a certain distance, right? If you ever want a good reference, if you ever want to place objects in your model, right? So where's the horizon line in this view?
The horizontal line.
What horizontal line? Oh yeah, this wasn't working for me earlier. Good thing I rendered it. Anybody want to tell me where the horizon line is?
Out there.
Where that dot is. Right? It's basically right here in the middle of that screen. I can tell Rhino. You guys are still talking. I will let you talk for like 2 more hours after this. So you can change it. We're looking at a regular perspective. You can change it to a 2-point perspective. It's going to stretch your view. You can alter that stretching, just like we were talking about earlier. If you're not selecting anything and you look at your camera settings, that lens length just shot up to 15. Right? If you're adding 30, it's going to stretch that perfect 2-point perspective a little less. So the perfect 2-point perspective, if you set your view, is going to be very different, right? But sometimes it feels really nice and spacious if you get the right angle. But it's very different than your typical regular perspective view, which as default is a 50 lens length. So play with these settings. Upperclassmen have told me that they've gone so far as to, select their perfect view by even going so far as to, instead of like your X location for where your camera is, maybe that's 55 instead of a point. Like if you want it to be a little bit different, oh my God. You can change these numbers slightly, and that might allow you to get the perfect view that you want. If you use your rotation, you're gonna mess everything up, right? You can set your target. So maybe if it's minus 65, like if your X location, if your Z location is 19, right? And my target is also 19. It's going to be perfectly straight on. If my target is 17, I'm going to be looking down because my camera's at 19 and my target's at 17. So think about how and where your camera is versus where your target is. The target is that line that's not there anymore. And once you get your view just right, and you want to keep going back to it, right? Go to view up here on the top left, set view, named views, brings up this menu. You could even save the menu on the left here. You go to that save as button, which is right there. View 1, or you could call it rest 1, whatever you want to do. Press OK. So if I ever change my view, set view perspective. If I ever change my view and I'm like, oh, cool, I want to get back inside that space, double click your views, right? It's under named views. If you ever lose it, it's under panels, named views, right? Render or panels, named views. And if you ever are manipulating your project and you make a bunch of copies, make sure that if you set up your views, you move your latest model back to wherever those views were taken. If not, you could have a fun time trying to match it or try to change those digits again to try to reposition. You can, there's a way to turn the camera on so that you could physically grab the camera and move it, but I don't find that as helpful. I find, honestly, to be more helpful, messing with these numbers, moving it ever so slightly, turning on the walkabout feature. That'll let you kind of move in and move out differently. If you really are getting stuck, like if your model is not moving in and moving out the way you want it to, zoom it, like select the area that you really want to be inside of and type ZS. ZS is the quick shortcut for zoom selected. And that'll let you kind of like reorient your view to look inside. Also, never forget about the pan feature. It's really helpful when you want to just move the camera, but not move the target. So you can move your camera up and down without changing the angle of the view. And that is my recorded session almost. Wait, I'm almost done. 2 more seconds. If I scroll down to today's lesson, in class. So if I look at that perspective, the cheat that I was talking about is if you press Control R, brings up your ruler. You could set your ruler to the horizon line, right? And now, if you're referencing, where did I put that? Downloads? No, desktop. So now when you put your characters in, your people to populate it, your eye level is at like what, 5'7"-ish? So think about this. If I put a tall person here, right? If I want them to stand where that is in space, I move that person's height to the horizon line. So if I want someone closer, duplicate, take the same person. If I want them standing in the foreground, there's the horizon line, there's the person. If I want them standing in the background, maybe behind that object, right? I'm transforming them by pressing Control T, and then I'm just moving them by clicking. So if I want them back here in space, press Enter. You can now duplicate your background. So on your background layer, you could either duplicate what's in front of them and move it up, or take that character. You want to right click and you want to do rasterize layer. Rasterizing means that it's not a smart object anymore. So a smart object, it understood that I changed the scale and ratio, but now that it's rasterized and it's not a smart object anymore for this one in the background, if I change the scale or if I skew it in any way and I try to transform it again, it's going to transform the version because it basically made a new image of that. I can't go backwards. So if I tried to edit a smart object, like the one in the foreground, and I skewed that image, I can always go back and it saves my transformation. A rasterized object does not save the transformation. It's just good to know because sometimes people are like, oh, I can't transform it because it's not or I can't delete it or I can't erase it. It's because it's not a rasterized object. So if it has that little icon down here, it's a smart object. So you just need to right click and rasterize it. So for example, I'll do this again. Duplicate the scale figure. Press Control T. Change the scale, put it where you want to go. If it's behind that object in space, maybe they're a little bit smaller back here. Press Enter. Maybe stick their head out a little bit, right? Right click. Rasterize layer. Now I can go in here. I could find that line. Whoa. I can find that line and press delete. So when I zoom out, they're behind the object. They're behind that place in space. And to really make it real, take your object, duplicate it, right? take your character, duplicate it, Control J, press Control T, hold down Control, and pull them lower. Take the controls here, press Enter, take the opacity, drop the opacity to like 10%, 20%, depending on how hard the shadows are. And now you have a realistic perspective because it has shadows. Try to match the shadows of how they're coming in. So it looks like they're coming in more towards the right. So maybe it's a little bit to the right. All right, anybody have any last minute questions? I can't tell if you have a question or you're just thinking.
Is this like a whole new model or using on?
You're using your existing model. So this is a great question. So for assignment, keep bringing up my email. I shouldn't do that. So for this assignment, the tools to make this assignment or these changes to your model, these alterations, these additions, these, 2G, these tools are in 2D. So not so much the perspective, but, making sure that the dimensions are right, and more specifically creating the skeleton out of the contour lines, or you can do it the hard way and just make rectangles. I don't, however you do it, the output is still the same, but this is how to learn the software. And then using the rail command for the sweeping, or using the sweeping command for the railing or the framing of the contours. That makes the skeleton. The skin is just an exfoliated or an extruded 1-inch piece. So if you've been operating in your model with really thin pieces as walls, make those a little bit thicker so you have that primary, secondary, tertiary system. Primary, site, foam, right? Secondary, chipboard, walls, surfaces, whatever you're laying on. Tertiary, skin, skeleton. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Almost think of it as paper and stick. Yeah.
So on our models, are we just picking certain parts of it to do the skeleton on? Or is that outlined in the?
No, not. So the hardest part about this is that I can't specifically say, oh, pick this part or pick that part, because that's really a conversation with your design professor as far as, changing your model. But the idea is that you should pick a surface in your model that can be manipulated, that strengthens the connection and the relationship between the site and the rest and bathe spaces, right? You want to, I always look at it as, and it's an extension and a way to connect them even more. So the ideal goal is that by the time you're done, when you're looking at these things from the outside, in my perspective, that they start blending together, right? You start losing the distinction between one and the other, and the model has a cohesiveness where you start having so much primary, secondary, tertiary, where the spaces are held within the site. So those rooms or those sit and dine experiences aren't just like white pieces of paper on a pink piece of foam. Like it really starts blending together, and it's not just happening in one area, it's happening throughout the model. So maybe you start implementing some of the skin and frame in areas that aren't necessarily the rooms or the spaces, the dining, thinking about this as also an opportunity for threshold. How do you introduce the scale of the space through a frame or through a skin versus a wall, right? Like, has anybody been through a portico? Like, what is an outdoor, what's an outdoor terrace, right? What is a screened in porch? What is, what are spaces that are so connected to the outside that are they inside or are they outside? Are they enclosed or are they open? You want to start playing with that connection, because that's what leads the difference between the site, the experience, and the enclosure. The connection between, the ground and the sky. Are you framing something looking out, or are you framing, in my opinion, almost nothing at all, right? This is so outside that it doesn't feel at all inside. This is almost not framing anything at all. It's just providing shape. So it's not even, it doesn't even feel like a threshold because you're not really experiencing this as a new space because of how little it's actually being enclosed. But you could use it as an architectural element to introduce the same experience in another part of the project. So this could just be, you know, the appetizer to the main event. Right? Cool. I ended with a food reference.